Hello and welcome to our second episode of Theology of Money. I'm Daniel Catone, entrepreneur, financial advisor, and founder of Arimathea, where we help Catholics align their investments with church teaching. This podcast is born out of a simple but radical conviction. Money isn't neutral. It shapes our souls, forms culture, and reveals what we really worship. That's why we're here, to rethink money in light of eternity. Joining me is Dr. Christopher Blum. He's professor of philosophy at the Augustine Institute. He spent decades bringing the church's wisdom to bear on the modern world, especially where virtue meets culture. Welcome, Dr. Blum, my co-host.
Thank you, Dan.
We're also joined by Dr. Pia de Solenni from IWP Capital, a moral theologian and former chancellor. She brings clarity and courage to the intersection of ethics, economics, and everyday life. My co-host, welcome, Pia.
Thank you, Dan.
Nice to have you here. This is exciting. And rounding out our panel is Chris Owens. He's the CEO of Vetrium Sapientia Institute. He's an instructor of philosophy at Belmont Abbey College. Is that correct? How you say it? Belmont Abbey College. Yes. He's a writer, educator, and longtime student of Catholic social teaching. He's here to keep us grounded, thoughtful, and just a little bit provocative. So welcome my other co-host, Chris Owens.
Hey, glad to be here. I like that provocative part. I'll try to keep that provocativeness grounded.
Well, I'm glad you're here too. Yeah, I want to see where that goes. We were just joking a few minutes ago about my horrific Latin, and I hope you will correct me on how I said your institute.
No, that's perfect. It's perfect. Much better than most. So,
well, okay. Well, me and Seneca then. We've got our Latin down. Is that right, Dr. Blum? You laughing?
Yeah, another one that you pulled from ChatGPT.
ChatGPT is changing the world, and we might have an entire episode just on artificial intelligence. I'm probably its biggest fan, and my hunch is Dr. Blum is probably its biggest enemy.
Am
I right?
You're correct.
Well, we'll have to find a happy medium between the two places that we both exist in.
There you go.
You know, Benedict XVI talked about how when you're in a vicious state, you have to go through a process of moralization, which intermediate states themselves aren't yet fully virtuous. So perhaps ChatGPT, if not fully virtuous, can be a tool to help get us back on track.
Well, I guess that's the first thing I'm curious about. Can artificial intelligence be virtuous?
Well, can you be virtuous and stupid at the same time?
Well, maybe sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think so. Right?
No.
I mean, if we have to know the end in order to choose it freely, and with ChatGPT we're offloading our thoughtfulness, this is not a good solution.
No, it's not. Do you get students ever sending in art papers that are written by ChatGPT?
Well, we do screen for that in some of the classes where they're just getting started in the master's program, but we actually flagged an application as ChatGPT, ran it through the computer, and it came back 100% likelihood of ChatGPT written.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well,
they were applying because they wanted to work under you, I think. Yeah, they just stuck your collected works into ChatGPT and said,
"There you go."
That's funny. Pia, have you ever used ChatGPT?
I have, yeah.
I find it very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has its uses. You know, like if I just have to, for example, if I have to just crank out a very generic letter, I can throw that into ChatGPT. If I sit there, just the way my brain works, I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about the fact that I have to do this, and then I'm going to wordsmith it and get frustrated. I throw that in, and suddenly I have something to edit. And usually, what I edit looks nothing like what came out. It was just a prompt. I did use it recently. I was trying to find a quote from John Paul Wojtyła's The Jeweler's Shop, and I knew that it gave me the wrong answer. I was just in a hurry, and so I knew that it gave me the wrong answer. So I went through my files and on my computer, which took 2 seconds, but whatever, and I found the right answer. So you cannot. It's not always right.
Well, you found what's called a hallucination, is what I've been taught. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the president of Arimathea is the former head of artificial intelligence monetization at Meta. And his name's Andrew DeBerry. He's a very thoughtful Catholic, a very brilliant man, frankly. He's also a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And he's really brought me up to speed in artificial intelligence in some ways. And he's since left that job. He's not, and I don't know what's worse in your mind, Dr. Bloom, monetization or artificial intelligence, but you put the two together and you've got all kinds of demonic stuff probably.
Oh, I'm not opposed to people making money, right? But yeah, thoughtfulness is just a good. So if we're, taking ends around the work of putting our thoughts in order, in the long run, that's just bad for us as human beings.
It's funny, not funny. I mean, interesting that you say that because I just read an article recently. I don't remember who the author was, and so I apologize for that. But the article made made an argument, and I think it was from medical work that had been done, that people that use digital maps have a deterioration of their mental faculties over time to the point where it increases the probability of Alzheimer's. And then people that do not use digital maps had later onset of Alzheimer's and better symptoms. And so maybe there's something to what you're saying there, Dr. Bloom. I'm sure there is, actually.
Well, I'm really curious, Daniel, since you're in the finance game. There's all of these products that pop up in my ads, in the Google ads and things, for AI bots that are trading bots. And you pay into a particular level of usage, and allegedly it buys and sells and adjusts to your tolerance of risk and helps you make money quickly. What do you make of all that?
A lot of gimmicks. So I'd like to see the returns, but aside from the gimmickiness of it, there was a study not done too long ago. It was maybe a couple years old that looked at robo-advisors. So this is where algorithms and machine learning are actually doing the investment selections on behalf of the clients. And what was found was really quite shocking is that people don't trust machines to trade their investments. They wanted humans. Now, this was before ChatGPT. So perhaps artificial intelligence is changing minds, but I don't think so. I think that there is a significant desire for humans to interact with humans. And artificial intelligence, we say this actually at Arimathea a lot, technology is an augmentation of human capability. We use technology in a sense, to facilitate what is human or facilitate communication or connection and things like that, not a replacement. So I am kind of out on AI trading for now, but I do. I would like to reserve the opportunity to change my mind because over the next 5 years, we're going to see things happen that in artificial intelligence that might cause us to change our minds in this respect. So, because it's a good question, but before we get into that, I was kind of noodling since our last podcast on some ideas about investing and finance. And I was thinking about our listeners and our viewers and where they might be in terms of knowledge of finance and knowledge of theology. We have no idea in a lot of respects. But my experience, having worked in finance that intersects with theology, is that people don't always know a lot of stuff about these various topics and they want to learn. And so I thought maybe we could start having a conversation on some very basic concepts. And the first one I want to put out there, Dr. Bloom, you wrote an article back in 2011 that I thought was really provocative and interesting. And I didn't agree with all of it. I think I wrote a critique of it back to you. And one of the main points that you made was the fact that as Catholics, as investors, and really I think as all people of goodwill, no matter what religion they adhere to, if they're people of goodwill, should be orienting their decision-making towards the common good. And I thought, when I first went to the Augustine Institute, I did not know what the word common good meant until I met Dr. Bloom. So I was hoping maybe we could start with you, Dr. Bloom, and kind of tell us, what does common good mean and what is its relationship to investing?
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's, this is a phrase that is hallowed by long usage, centuries upon centuries, and lots of different excellent perspectives. It's difficult because there's sort of layers of commonality, if you will, and also kind of layers of goodness, right? So maybe we should start with just the good, right? What is the good? Well, it's that which all desire, right? So it's being under the heading of appetitable, right, or desirable, right? So then if we were to modify good by common, that we're somehow looking at goods that people are able to share together, right? So that your tea is no good to me except instrumentally, right? If it softens up your vocal cords and kind of calms you down a little bit, we have a better conversation. Okay? But
I need like 3 cups of tea to calm down.
exactly, but as tea, right, it does me no good, right? Because it's this material, substance, right, that has it's one use, right? Just like my shoes, right? They won't do anybody else any good because my foot deforms the shoe for anybody else's use. So the goods that are common are goods that people are able to participate in together, right? So we think, sort of an archetypal example here would be victory for a sports team, right? You can't have it by yourself. It's the kind of thing that you can only have as part of a team, and it's a really good thing, right?
Yeah.
You're all striving for it together, right? So that's the example that I like to use to start people thinking, oh, okay, so certain goods are only mine if they are in some sense ours. And just what are those goods?
It's an interesting question. So, what are those goods? I'm going to ask you a really hard question. This is a hard question. I asked Trent Horn this on my podcast, Treasures in Heaven. I asked him, is existence a good? Why are you laughing? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a fine question. Yes, Dan, being is a good. Yes.
Okay, I agree with that.
It's good to be.
He had a little different answer. You have to listen to the episode to find out, I think. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that. But so I guess the question still stands: what is the relationship between the common good and our investment decisions and our financial decisions? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd want to maybe jump in and before we move straight to investment, sort of say,
Yeah.
well, what do we mean by common, right? Christopher does a great job there at helping us to understand that it has to be something that's immaterial, that's shared, and it was I always appreciated this, that when you contribute to the common good, it's something that you're able to give, but that in giving you actually have an increase in your own possession as well, right? And so by contributing to the common good, by building up whatever this thing is, you don't lose, but in fact you increase your own possession of it.
Can you give me an example? Because that's pretty high up there for me.
Yeah, maybe like really trivial, but like laughter, as like maybe a very, very low level sort of if you tell a joke, the joke itself isn't necessarily, but like what it produces, right? In an effect in people, if that brings some sort of lower level
Hilaritas.
happiness. Yes, there
What
we
is the
go.
word?
Yes.
What is the Latin word?
What did you say, Christopher? I couldn't hear you.
Hilaritas.
Yes,
Hilaritas.
hilaritas. Yes. Aquinas had a lot of hilaritas to contribute because he was greater in girth than others. But yes, but it seems like when you laugh, right, you make someone else laugh. Then you're not giving away. You're not losing your own sense of joy either. You're if someone responds positively, then that increases in you as well. So
Interesting. Do you agree with these gentlemen, Pia?
Overall, yeah. If I
overall.
if I love someone, I don't lose love by giving love to
No.
another person. And in fact, my experience of love increases, even if that person doesn't love me back. My
Mm,
experience of love increases. And
mm,
I mean, I would say particularly in certain situations that are unjust or imbalanced, we get angry at God because we say, "Why doesn't this person love me the way that I think I should be loved?" And
mm,
I like to point out to people that the very fact that we can ask that question is because, in some level, we know the love of God and we know that
mm,
God's standing beside us. We wouldn't be angry if we didn't have a profound sense, frankly, of justice that it should be shared.
mm, mm.
So
Well, that's
that's
a
an
that's a
important thing in marital dispute. People in troubled marriages, no, in troubled
mm,
marriages and stuff. People wonder like, what did I do wrong, or why doesn't this person treat me well? Why doesn't this person love me? The very fact that you can ask those questions, to my mind, shows that A, you're capable of love, and B, that you know love in the person of God,
mm.
one of His
That's
persons.
beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection. Well, I appreciate this feedback on what common good actually means because it's not an easy subject. And you actually, I was thinking about a line that you had actually, Dr. Bloom, in the article, and I think we can put this article on the podcast in some way, like maybe a link to it, so people can read it too for themselves. But you made some interesting statements regarding the common good. I'm gonna read one. Well, you were quoting St. Thomas Aquinas, and you said, "Nothing stands firm unless directed to the last end, which is the common good." What do what does St. Thomas Aquinas and perhaps someday St. Dr. Bloom mean by that, Dr. Bloom?
Well, yeah. I mean, again, if we take the sports team, right, as an easier example to talk about than society as a whole, because the sports team, right, narrows down the range of human activity to this
Mm,
one practice, right? Baseball, say, right, or soccer, right? Um, well, the end is pretty clear, right? It's honorable victory or noble victory, right? Nobody who really loves his or her sport wants to win by cheating or wants to win by playing in a way that's not uh, supremely reputable from the point of view of the great players of that sport in the past, right? You want to be a shining example of soccer, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, right? So the nobility part is essential, right? But then the victory part is also essential, right? We don't. If I'm coach, I don't want anybody on my team who is falling short in the desire to win, right? This is a game after all. It's not all of life, right? We're coming together for this very
mm,
particular end, and in this case, right, it's to win the World Series or to win the Super Bowl or whatever it is, right? Win the World Cup.
yeah.
So noble victory, and uh, therefore, right, whether it's diet or sleep habits
Mm,
or what the equipment that we wear, uh, or how we diagram and plan our plays, how we practice, how we treat one another as teammates, all of these features of life on the team are oriented towards that noble victory.
mm,
And we judge a behavior to fall short when either it comes off the ideal for nobility, or God forbid, in a certain sense, right, the player is no longer playing to win, right? And the obvious way in which players don't play to win is that they play for their own personal
mm,
glory as opposed to actual victory, right?
Mhm.
And so we worry, sometimes, for instance, we baseball fans worry a little bit about big home run hitters because
yeah.
we're just not sure whether they're up there at the plate thinking about what it takes to win that game or whether they're thinking about hitting that 40th home run.
Mm,
And
Oh, I can be really practical on that. When I was coaching middle school lacrosse this season, and
oh,
let's just say we're in a developing year. Um,
there you go.
but yeah, we have a lot of sixth graders, and when they were going out to games and seeing all these eighth graders, it was a big difference. But
yeah.
definitely saw like some of our better, more experienced players that play year-round ball. actually didn't do well the first half of the season because they recognized a gap in experience, and rather than helping their teammates come along, they chose to keep the ball, and then of course we had turnovers and go down an addition on our goalie. Happened to be my son, but but by the end of the season, both in terms of growth of the skill of the other players and in terms of their willingness to contribute in a team like manner, we saw real improvement, and maybe that helps actually, because winning is something that's fleeting and it's passing, and it's something that's uh, you're, especially in playoffs, you always end the season with a loss, right? And there's something really dissatisfying about that. But when you take having a winning season off the table, like we sort of did this season, then you're looking for other things. You're looking for growth and virtue, right? We're looking for fortitude, right? We're looking for temperance. We're looking for an increase in prudence, in right judgment and action. In this instance, do I hold? Do I shoot? Do I pass? And then we had a lot of issues with officials also this season. So certainly there was an account of justice that we felt robbed of.
Oh, it's just terrible. It's unfair to those poor little ones. Well,
Yes.
and I appreciate this discussion on the common good. And I was thinking back, Dr. Bloom, about, of course, we read Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle's, I would say, seminal work, one of them. And but then we read After Virtue, MacIntyre, And I think one of the arguments that MacIntyre makes is that we have lost the language of virtue, and that we really are unable even to speak of the subject in modern context. And yet here we are doing so.
Yeah.
Help me pull that thread a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, if we see noble victory as a good that's shared fully by every member of the team, right? So it's a good example of a common good because all strive for it together. They can't strive for it apart from the team, right? You're just not playing the game unless you're part of the team, right? And it is an immaterial good, as it were, right? Because we're in a purely conventional zone here. We've agreed to come together with another team to play a certain number of minutes with a certain set of rules and so forth. So everything here is in the realm of things understood. Okay. And so there's a good metaphor for life here. Noble victory is a good kind of marker for the common good. And then what we want to do is shift our focus to society as a whole, and not one season or 90 minutes, but an appropriate length of time, right? What do we take an appropriate length of time to be for sizing up a society? I don't know, several generations, I would say, right? Nobody wants to say, well, America was a great country for 5 years, right? No, we want to think of a political unit as enjoying peace over a prolonged period of time, right? And so then we ask, okay, well, what does victory for a whole society look like over a decent length of time, 2, 3, 4 generations? So we need to throw some thoughts at that.
Yeah, Aristotle in the Politics, right? He comments on this right in the very beginning. He says it's good for one man to attain to happiness, but is a far more noble and even godlike thing for it to be attained by many or even by all, right? And I think that in another way he's describing the common good there.
Well, one of my friends was raised, she came from a large family, and her mom said you can have as much fun as you want until it keeps someone else from having fun.
Oh, I like that very much. Is America a great nation?
100%. I don't agree with the state of our culture, but I do think we're
100%.
I do think we're a great nation.
All right.
Define great. I mean, I guess I would say define great. I'm not saying morally great, no. But it's an impressive. It's one of the most
great,
impressive.
like the Roman Empire great.
I think there's something there, especially in it. Well, I mean, the Roman Empire had tremendous ideals that at the end of the time, end of the day were fleeting.
True.
They weren't
And
they
yet,
weren't lived. And
and
that's
yet
the that's
patriotism is a virtue, right? And
Mhm.
so here we live in this nation of ours, which we would all agree is great in terms of instrumental power. I think that's undeniable. We have nuclear weapons and all that kind of thing. Morally great, I think that's a question mark. Has there ever been a morally great nation?
Yeah, that's I think that's a bit of a red herring, right? We expect in a world that's constituted by sin after the fall, right? We expect there to be always very, very significant problems in any society that we're looking at, right?
Mm,
So the question is not is this or that time and place perfection, right? Because that perfection is in heaven, and that's the only place that it is. Um, Rather, the question is: are we living as human beings are meant to live? Right. So the phrase that Aquinas uses uh, more than once is the common good of justice and peace. Right. So to sort of put justice and peace in apposition to the phrase the common good, right? To suggest that these things are more or less equivalent,
mm,
right? Certainly in the summer of 2020, it was not a peaceful society to be living in, right?
no.
And
Mm,
justice, well, we are, I think, all of us today aware, 2025, we're all much more keenly aware of how
mm.
fragile the rule of law is in America than maybe 20 years ago we would have thought, right? So the
I've got
common good of justice and
a
peace.
question kind of,
Hmm.
we're assuming a sort of a polity, and we naturally jump to the United States. In another way, that the sports team as a sort of community, or a family as a first society, but an imperfect one. And I just kind of want to ask provocatively, uh, uh, ultimately, who belongs to this common good? I know I've got an answer, which may be provocative or not, but I want to, because I think it helps clarify the question we talked. We're closer to what common good is, but who ultimately is a part of this, right? Is everybody a part of it?
That'd be my answer. My immediate answer would be all human beings, all human persons are participants in the common good, and that there is not necessarily a national identity that can be attached to common good. If you if you think about the impact and the sharing of goods globally, I think that would be the best way. I think the most Catholic way to look at this. But I'm not. I'm the only person here who ain't a professor, so maybe.
You might be the smartest one then.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Let's
Yeah.
practice Latin some more.
To Chris Owens' point, we're going to assess the communities on the basis of what goods they're able to provide for their members, right? So Chris mentioned that the family is an imperfect community. That's not because there's something wrong with families. It's because the nuclear family, or even the extended family, so mom and dad, an uncle and an aunt, maybe a grandparent or two, and even some pets, right, with a bunch of kids, right? Even a 15-person extended family still doesn't have a police force, right?
Mm,
Can't protect the walls against the invading barbarians. Can't really run schools all the way up to the PhD in nuclear physics, right? So
mm,
it's an imperfect society because it can only do certain things, right? And I think that same analysis applies to the world as a society.
mm,
Okay, of course, we're all going to agree with you, Dan, that human beings, just as such, deserve to be treated as righteously because they're made in the image and likeness of God, right? Um, but that doesn't mean that somebody living in New Zealand is my neighbor in the same way that Jim and Emily are my neighbors, right? The person in New Zealand doesn't care whether I mow my lawn, okay? But Jim and
mm,
Emily really want me to mow my lawn once every week,
mm.
and they're right to do so.
Well, let me challenge this a little bit. So I think what you've outlined is St. Thomas Aquinas and the way in which he talks about who our neighbors are in proximity to us, right, as we go out from us.
Mm-hmm.
And J.D. Vance, vice president, actually got in a lot of trouble a couple months ago talking about that, and I think inarticulately talking about that, frankly. But my question is maybe a challenge for you, Christopher, especially, is the common good in relation to victory seems to be a little bit of a problem for me, because if the United States wins and Iran loses, it's no longer a common good shared amongst the peoples involved, but only half the peoples involved.
Well, that's just because you're not thinking of victory the right way,
I
right?
hope.
So,
Yes, I think
Yeah.
you're right.
as Chris Owens suggested,
Mhm.
right, it's happiness that's victory.
Mm.
Okay, so living as far as one can, right, an entire life virtuously, crowning that life with worship of God, dying and being welcomed by the grace of Christ into eternal life. That's victory for a human being, right? That's also happiness for a human being. So if we're talking about a society, again, whether it's a family or a town or a state, a U.S. state or county or something, right? What we're looking for is some sort of sharing in a common life of virtue that's directed towards the worship of God.
I mean, I appreciate that, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. Maybe. Let's look at the sports team analogy. So if you have two sports teams that play against each other and if victory is the common good and one team loses and is very dejected and unhappy, now you have the problem of the happiness being reduced and the common good no longer being shared, which is victory.
But a sports team, I mean, if it's a really good game,
Yeah.
yes, there's an experience of loss, but
Yeah.
there's also that feeling of, wow, that was an amazing game.
I
And
don't think you're as
especially if you,
competitive as me.
fair enough. I mean, but
I
back with
actually
your
wanted to,
Iran example, I would be
Yeah.
careful. I mean,
Mm.
the news that I follow on Iran suggests that there are a lot of people there that would be happy if we defeated Iran.
And there's a lot of people in America would be happy if we didn't attack Iran.
Attack and
Yeah.
defeat, or to attack or defeat. I mean, if we're
We can't
talking,
have one without the other.
well, no, but you said defeat, so I thought
Yeah.
we started with defeat. So
Fair enough.
I
Yeah.
mean, just in the pursuit of a truly free life,
Mm.
not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom for. There are a lot of people that live in Iran that don't have that under the current regime, and they won't.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where I'm falling on this one yet, and I'm not sure if our readers, our listeners, and our viewers are certain on the conclusions, which actually I kind of like. I think people should explore this topic more. And
Well,
I'd
I
like
was
to.
going to propose
Yeah, go ahead.
well, because we've
Yeah.
been talking about the common good from the perspective of philosophy,
Mhm.
right? And this is the theology of money.
I was just going to say, you're all a bunch of
Yeah.
philosophers.
We've butted right up against it. I actually, if we had time, I'd want to go back to Christopher's assertion about cats and dogs participating in the common good, and whether that's the case. But
Well, my little Pepper and my dog, she participates in the common good when I give her little snackies.
I love it. But I'm working on my dissertation right now on predestination and the
Mm.
thought of Aquinas, and I'd like to boldly assert that predestination is one of the first signs or fruits of attainment of the common good and its totality. That's a totally different subject matter, but that one in fact attains to their supernatural end, union with God in heaven. It seems like those who do that are the ones who, as St. Paul says, have run the race, right, successfully. To continue our
Mhm.
sports metaphors.
Yeah.
It's
It's interesting. You're right. I
and
think
everybody who
theosis is
doesn't,
the greatest good.
yeah, and everybody who doesn't, like, we can still talk about a participation in
Yeah.
the common good in some way, without complete possession. But in its finality, if they don't attain the reason for which they're made, then they fall short of full possession.
Well,
I
let's
don't know
pick on my
that
favorite. I
yeah.
think you're right. I agree with you, actually, Chris. I think we'll pick on my favorite foil in finance, and that's Warren Buffett.
Hmm.
And I don't know if he listens to this podcast, and if he does, he's not going to like me. I'm not a huge fan of Warren Buffett. Um, here is a man who, 50 years ago started investing originally with I believe it was a carpet company he bought or something like that. I'm sure he ripped someone off to get started and then built his massive empire of Berkshire Hathaway over this time. And now he's like 150 years old and worth $1 trillion. And he is making the single largest charitable contribution ever in the history of the United States. And
Oh
he's making
dear.
it to various pro-choice organizations upon his death. It's literally in the hundreds of billions is the
Oh
estimate.
dear.
And
Yeah.
each of his kids' foundations are
Yep.
likewise making similar donations to pro-abortion groups.
Oh
Yep.
Lord have
So think
mercy.
of like Catholics for, I'm using major air quotes here, Catholics for Choice, and all these other, horrific organizations that want to kill children. So if we're looking for an example of the exact opposite of investments relating to the common good in the way we would want to do so, I think Warren Buffett is a wonderful teacher for us because he has amassed this massive wealth. He has participated in the greatest wealth creation system in human history, which is the United States stock market. And what is the fruit? Death.
Mhm.
But would you agree that he's would be the exact opposite of what we should be as investors, or what would you think?
Mm.
Well, we talked about it in the last podcast, I think, about how money is an instrument, right?
Mhm.
And so in of itself, it's maybe a morally neutral or maybe even impelling towards a morally good thing, insofar as money represents something real. But in use, uh, this is about the person, the subject, who is freely determining its own moral action there, right? So yeah, I guess amassing wealth for the purpose of a evil use is taken as a whole a bad thing, even if
Mhm.
discreetly we can say that amassing wealth is not necessarily a bad thing.
And think about that quote that I read from St. Thomas Aquinas: nothing stands firm unless directed to the last end, which is the common good. So if Warren Buffett's wealth that he has created in the, $1 trillion or whatever it's worth, is that if that is not oriented towards the common good, which clearly it is not, what is going to happen with this investment he's making in these horrific organizations? I think if St. Thomas Aquinas is correct, this will all come to naught. It'll dissolve like salt in water because it's not oriented towards the common good. Am I? Philosophers and theologians, by the way, I've been corrected multiple times, and not everybody here likes being called a theologian. So, my philosopher and theologian friends, whatever your persuasion is, am I off base there in interpreting St. Thomas in that way? Because Warren Buffett's not directed towards the common good. There's nothing to stand firm on.
Yeah, well, of course you're right, Dan. But I think
I
that,
love hearing that. By the way, let's write that phrase down.
but I think you're sort of racing ahead and
Mm.
leaving out a number of steps of the argument, if you will. But I take your point to be a very fine one. That here's a very public figure who's
Mm.
arguably the most famous investor in the history of investing. Okay, at this point, I think
Mhm.
it's safe to say that that's the
Mhm.
case, and to some degree, an inscrutable man, right? Just what's he all about? Well, nobody has really known, right? But now with his last will and testament, right, he's kind of putting a point to his life, if you will. Scary thing to do, right? And so he's revealing something of his character in this disposition of his wealth. Okay,
Mhm.
so I take your, if all that you say, I don't follow the news, so I don't know these things. But if what you say is accurate, then this is a frightful
Yeah.
reality. But I think that, what Aquinas is talking about vis-a-vis nothing standing firm unless it's directed to the last end, right? I mean, take the proverbial poorly coached sports team, right? Where the coach is ineffectual, right? He doesn't have the character to actually knit the boys. Let's say we're talking about a Disney movie, right? He doesn't have the character to knit the boys into a team.
The Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, or Hoosiers before Gene Hackman shows up and
Yeah.
starts coaching them, whatever, But the ineffectual coach can't get the team headed towards the one end. Okay, and so you have different players pursuing different ends. Okay, and so they lose all their games, and they hate one another while they do it, and they squabble, and people quit the team, and all this sort of thing, right? So it's that failure to marshal everything towards the true highest good or last end that leads to ineffectual community life, if you will. The thing falls apart. Okay.
I think that you have filled in the gaps to where I rushed ahead, and I appreciate that very much, Dr. Blum.
But I want to counter to the presupposition, though, right? Because in a just world, you're exactly right. But we live in a fallen world, and it's what ultimately justice will be restored at the end of time, right? And a new heaven and a new earth, right? But in this time and that we're living in, I mean, it's kind of unfortunately the case that that we're likely to see evil to prevail in large and dramatic ways like this. And I always think of the book of Job in this regard, right? Like we shouldn't make the mistake of seeing temporal blessings or temporal curses as definitive for that true and final happiness that is the attainment of the common good. Now, we should work towards a more just society, right? We should try as much as we can to build the kingdom of God here, insofar as it makes the gospel more able to be proclaimed effectively and to bring more into the fold. But I think also we also have to. I lived in England for a number of years, and the English temperament, we're what you call maybe moderate pessimists, because we don't have enough of a conviction to be completely pessimistic, but sort of keeping your chin up in spite of adversity kind of.
I think it comes from living in the fog
attitude.
and rain all the time.
Right. It's
Probably like the
true,
nice folks in Seattle.
Yes. Yes. I hear they exist.
Yeah.
Yes.
I lived in Seattle.
It's a lovely place.
But yeah, I think that's something like it's unfortunate that community organizing seems to be a particular skill set of those who want to bring about a culture of death, right? And those who champion life very often aren't as concerned with robust community organizing models.
But sometimes those that champion life don't model it very well.
What do you mean?
I mean, so Dr. Anthony Levatino, former abortion provider, in one of his first testimonies after he stopped doing abortions, he was asked a question at the end of his talk, and basically, what can I do to be more pro-life? And he said, if you're here when you should be with your family, go to your family, because you're teaching your family the pro-choice message. If you sit around and say, I can't wait till my kids start school, parentheses, everybody understands that parents get tired, all right? Yeah. But you're teaching a certain message. And so I think, and I've seen this, I mean, having worked both in the marriage movement and the life movement, I see a lot of people on the front lines whose personal lives are a mess. And if you want to fix the culture, you have to start with the immediate culture is where you're at. And for many people, it is in the space of a family. And, I was just at a conference at Benedictine, and the question I had was, it was on marriage and family. And, it's like, I think we approach this like a lifestyle hack. If you don't use contraception and you get married and wear your brown scapular and pray your rosary, everything's going to be grand. And that's grace builds upon nature, right? The nature has to work. But the second point I have is, why is it that we have children, now adult children, coming from big families, and this has been happening for decades, who are not embracing the idea of having a big family, much less getting married? So why is that? Well, there's something that's learned or experienced in the family, and I'm not saying that the parents are ogres, but we really have to focus on what's the most immediate thing that we can control, and that's the space that's right around us, the people that we encounter, our family members, our friends, our colleagues. And we really, I mean, it's if we start working in, so big rabbit hole, but there was an article one time in Christianity Today, and this father had written it, and he had a young child about 7 or 8, who was preparing for death. Well, the child was dying, the father's trying to prepare him. And we haven't been blessed with children. I could not even begin to wrap my head around what that must be like. So the father's trying to explain to the child what it will be like to go to heaven. And the child interrupts him. His son interrupts him and says, well, I know what God the Father will be like because I know what you're like. And so he had anticipation for God the Father because of who he had experienced as a father. In my book, like, that dad he's a rock star. He's amazing. If your kid can have that idea, I mean, it's just phenomenal. But
I guess it's Pia's job to make us fathers cry on podcasts. So congratulations.
Well, I'm not trying to guilt anyone. I'm just saying that sometimes I do think that the most important work is the work that's whatever relationships are right around us. And we may or may not be married, but wherever we're at, that's kind of our garden. And that's the space that we have to be in. And I think we get so caught up and I'm great. I'm great at getting caught up in the grand ideas and just, we can change the world if this, that, and the other. The reason that the world isn't going the direction that we want it to go is because we have failed at this more immediate place. And let's not forget, I mean, I don't know what Warren Buffett's background is, but a lot of the major investors, the big CEOs, I mean, they come from a Catholic culture. They went to Catholic schools. BlackRock has tons of Catholic customers. State Street too. I mean, the Catholic ethos is there. Somehow we haven't been living it. Not living it enough.
Yeah. So what's wrong with the world? Me. Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's what it comes down to. And you asked, sorry, Dr. Blum, please. Go ahead.
I wonder if we could just sort of shift from the sports team analogy to the corporation for a moment. If we were to sort of ask the question, what's victory for a corporation, or what does success look like for a corporation, right? We're not going to say it's hockey stick growth and then an IPO and then you just go sip Mai Tais on. Isn't that your favorite thing?
Sip Mai Tais on the beach. Yeah,
that's
not
right.
supposed to do that.
No, you're not supposed to do that, right?
Not for more than a week.
That's not the story that we want to tell, right? We want to tell a story that's somehow much more like a kind of John Deere type story, right? We want to make a product that people live by and they trust, and that we're proud to make it. And people who work in our corporation love to work there, and the communities in which the corporation is located love to have the company as a neighbor, et cetera, right? So somehow that's what victory looks like for a corporation.
But you didn't mention profit.
Profit is like breathing for economic activity, right? If you don't have profit, then you're dying or dead. Okay, so that's permission to play, and then we can dial in, how much profit is reasonable and so forth. But there's got to be profit. But we don't get up in the morning thinking so much about profit. We think about, I'm proud to make widgets because widgets are good for people, right? That's what we're looking for. We want a common endeavor, a corporation that makes widgets, that each person who belongs to it, right, can participate in that common endeavor and feel enriched humanly, right, while of course making a living and a profit and the rest of it, right? But this is somehow victory for a corporation is in this zone, okay? And so then it seems to me, armed with that sort of very vague general notion, we could then look at American society today and say, well, how are we doing? Right? Do people tend to really be loyal to their companies and stay at one place for a very long period of time? Do executives tend to be hard to pry away from places because they're so loyal and so on? We could ask those kinds of questions, and we're going to get a really mixed set of answers these days. It seems to me.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that, Christopher. I mean, I've spent most of my career working for the church institutional, which nonprofit is a very different game than for profit. But I've always been impressed with Patrick Lencioni's work on organizational health, precisely because of the goods that you're articulating there. And he likes to point out that whether it's the janitor or whether it's the executive, like everybody should know that their work is meaningfully contributing to the mission, right? And that's really important. It seems to me like if we want to start by the visible witness that the church gives, the church institutional, we can kind of bracket there. Oftentimes it's the case that chanceries are like some of the most oppressive places to be, and nobody's happy, and it's unfortunate because you're privileged to be able to be engaged in the very best organizational mission, the very best sort of work that there can be. And I had a colleague when I worked in California, and he said, why isn't it that a Catholic diocese isn't on the Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for list?
Wow.
Like shouldn't that be the goal?
Yep.
It should be the
yeah.
goal.
Yeah, but
You're
I think
right,
you're
Chris.
right.
It's Pia. You asked a question that I want to explore a little bit. You asked the question is why is it these people that are coming from large families are not then having large families themselves? And you talked about our own failures in promotion of the basic unit of society, I think, of family. That's, I think, obvious in America. But would you agree with me that the problem is, yes, what we've done to families, but that's perhaps a byproduct of what we've done with the economics of the West and the rise of what we've been doing since World War II really has led. I mean, look at young people today. I mean, good luck buying a house, right? I mean, these folks are looking at oblivion. I mean, it's like nothing for them in the future economically in a lot of ways. $36 trillion in federal debt, $2 trillion deficit every year. That the greatest generation hoisted upon people under 40, let's say. None of us, well, except for UP, of course. But so what do you think? Do you think that's true? Is it economic? Is it family? What is it?
I think it's a combination of factors, but I honestly, like, I'll hear people say that use economics as an excuse, but I have never come across somebody who said, we're not getting married because we don't have the money. Like, so, and people all over the world get married without money. And obviously look, I'm not telling people to go out and get married if they don't have a way to support themselves. It's a nuanced conversation. All right. But that's not the primary motivator. And I think that there's something more fundamental, which is an absence or lack of hope. And this has been going on again for decades. And this is an interesting thing that I heard at the conference. I can't remember if it was Tim Carney or Brad Wilcox that pointed this out. I think it was Tim Carney. So birth rates after World War II, the baby boom, happened in the Allied countries. Japan, Germany, and help me, what was our third Axis country?
Oh, Italy.
Italy.
Yeah.
Birth rates went down. I mean, they had no hope. They'd been pummeled. And absolutely and And I mean,
I don't think
sidebar,
Japan ever recovered.
no. And
Neither did
sidebar,
Italy.
we also don't
No.
know. We also don't know what people fully experienced in those countries. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But you have to have a sense of hope. And marriage is risky business. And you have to have a sense of hope that you, and I think what's missing is a fundamental sense of hope for a lot of reasons. It can be one's own personal experience within the family. It can be cultural, societal, like it, but I think that ultimately there's a problem of hope. Why would you
Mm.
not want to? I mean, it's the absence. If you don't want to get married and have children, and you think you are called to that,
Mhm.
you fundamentally have to have an absence of hope. And there
You
may
know,
be very real reasons for that. I'm not diminishing them.
mhm.
I think this is very complex.
But back to the question of the corporate role in that, where we started. I mean, there's a certain instrumentalization of the worker that's happened over the last many decades, where
Since the
job
Industrial
stability.
Revolution.
Yeah, rerum
Well,
novarum.
indeed, yeah. Uh, but even like the stability that you would have a career in one place, that maybe our parents or grandparents counted on, the trust of the institution and the commitment to it, that's no longer there because employers don't have that, and certainly employees can't
Mm-mm.
reciprocate what isn't given to begin with, um, but I think there's something to the sort of the intangibles that impel towards a common good in a workplace that that says something about whether that's something I want to invest my money in and contribute towards building and growing, right? And in a place that has all the signs of disease and sickness externally, you don't have the ability to see if there's cancer, but you certainly wouldn't want to invest your money in such a risky proposition either. So I think we can look at some of these intangibles as earmarkers of health, and also a sign that that where the corporation and the mission and the work of the corporation responds to a need, but also has these other signs of health, like that's something that's inspiring to me. Uh, I actually had the privilege as a young man of working for one of Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for. I think it peaked out at like number 2 at a point, and I won't name the name because everybody will send me nasty grams about how abominable their social platform is, which
They
is
didn't
true.
listen to you.
Right? Well, I was just a lowly sales guy, but it was getting up and going to work was just a lot of fun, right? And it didn't seem like work because what I got to do every day was go hang out with people I liked and to help people that wanted to come and engage with the sorts of things that we were selling, right? And they saw something about that as a lifestyle that was attractive. I think we've got a lot to learn in coming back to that whole church institutional thing. We got a lot to learn from professional competencies, and this is what Gaudium et Spes certainly talks about in Second Vatican Council is looking at secular competencies and bringing them to bear for the mission of the church, and not only in the explicit proclamation of the gospel, but in how we order our businesses. If we're business owners, how do we provide better wages or better benefits, and how do we build up a more just society in pursuit of the common good?
Pope St. John Paul II, he wrote Centesimus Annus. And I guess my question to you, do you like that Latin? Was that pretty
Well,
good?
I'd say Centesimus, but that's okay.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's a legit
Well,
pronunciation.
once you finish your doctorate, you can correct me. Until then. So Pope St. John Paul II, he wrote this encyclical. Do you believe that he baptized the free market with that document? Is it an endorsement of the free markets? No, Pia?
No, I mean, I think he cautions against both communism and capitalism in there. right? And it's, again, your economic system has to be built around the dignity of the human person. So communism is intrinsically flawed and cannot do that. Capitalism, within certain guidelines, boundaries, it can.
Intrinsically flawed.
Well. The socialism, right? It bypasses subsidiarity in favor of a sort of solidarity, right? I'm painting with a super broad stroke, and I'm happy to be corrected
You don't have any paint.
with a nuance. But one thing that capitalism does have in its advantage, right, is the bootstrap mentality absolutely prioritizes subsidiarity, but maybe too much, right? I mean, one of the theories of the free market is that moral considerations matter, and if even in an unregulated market, buyers will vote with their dollars. I think that may be a little bit idealistic.
It's extraordinarily idealistic.
Right?
I will
I
say,
agree.
I'm going to say, I don't agree with any of this. So,
Well, you called me comrade last time, so I did want to sort of, get out from under that.
That's fair. It was a compliment, actually. So I think that capitalism is inherently flawed. I think that subsidiarity is not a base principle that's regularly used in capitalism. I think the product of capitalism is consolidation and bringing decision making away from the individual and bringing it up to mega corporations and inclusion with the government, which is a type of fascism, of course. So I just don't see subsidiarity as being part and parcel of capitalist economic theory. I don't see it at all. And I see, Dr. Bloom, you may be half nodding towards me, which is probably the
Yeah.
best nod I've ever gotten from you.
Yeah, that's really only a half nod there, pal. Yeah,
A third.
I mean, I think if we think back to 1991 or whenever, is that when Centesimus was 1991?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so the Berlin Wall is rubble, but we've got a whole generation of bishops and archbishops and cardinals who are soft lefty socialists, but by and large we still do today.
Oh boy, you got to name
funny.
names. If you're
Yeah,
going to say bishops, you got to say their names.
It's no thanks. It's funny how these things just don't die. But here's the thing about there's a kind of occupational hazard to the Catholic priesthood, especially then as it becomes the hierarchy of the church. Right? Is that these are men who don't iron their own shirts and don't pay the power bill, right? And so they're living within a certain life world that's very different from the life of the laity, right? So I think that the lean towards socialism in the 70s, 80s was pretty pronounced in the Catholic hierarchy. And I think Centesimus Annus is sounding a bit of a note contrary to that, to say, in effect, capital investment is good for people, right? Because you're this laborer that you supposedly want to help, you socialists, right? This laborer can't do his work without a tool. Yeah. He can't dig without a shovel, and that shovel is capital. Yeah. Right. So I think Centesimus is trying to kind of right the balance a little bit away from a kind of fanciful notion that we don't have to worry about where the shovels come from. We just have to worry about being nice to the laborers. Okay. And that just won't do. We could run out of shovels.
Yeah. And
Well,
when we have the rise,
get back to the
excuse me,
idea
Pia, go ahead.
get back to the idea of what happens in the chancery, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that have jobs there that wouldn't have a job if it weren't for bureaucracy.
Mhm.
And then this mentality gets built or spun out that somehow it's mean to let people go, even though they're not even doing they're not doing a role that's essential to the entity, the chancery. They're not even doing what it is that they do well. And so it's just this crazy, and it gets very warped. And I mean, I have frequently said the chancery is not Catholic charities.
Could use a dose of capitalism in there.
Well, and there's so much I don't want to completely derail us, but there's just so much there to unpack. Like, how do we help people to find a job that they would be good at? And is it within the chancery, or maybe it's somewhere else? I think we could do a lot to help people to thrive
Yeah.
in many
There's a
different ways.
university, I won't name the name, but I'm aware they produce a lot of very bright-eyed young Catholics who want to go serve the church on mission in the world, and there's this sort of inspirational speech of where they try to say to people, don't go work for the church unless you can't find happiness working anywhere else, and it's meant to be inspirational, right?
What does a
Um,
21-year-old know about
yeah,
happiness
right.
anyways?
But like that there's actually kind of a double edge on that, because like too often the folks who end up working for the church in some places, yeah, as Pia was saying, like they can't work anywhere else, right? So
Mm,
and sometimes, right? And it's how do we hold ourselves accountable to professional competencies, performance reviews and things like this, and actual objectives that are productive of the professional work of the church, and in a way that is a truly human approach to the employer employee relationship. Um,
I'm going to say, Chris, to a much lesser extent, Pia, I am very concerned about the corporatization of the Holy Catholic Church, bureaucratization. I mean, it's always been a bureaucracy, but I mean, there's like this sort of modern version of bureaucracy that, in a sense, is like more Byzantine than Byzantine bureaucracy. But the language that the church uses in its various documents, but just that sort of corporate ease and so when we're saying, we got to make sure we have corporate efficiency inside the chancery and all that sort of, well, yes, that's true to a point. And I think we can go way too far with this and say the Catholic Church's chancery needs to look like a business. And I don't think it does. Am I wrong?
I think it.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain degree, I think it does, in the sense
Yeah.
that the chancery is. I mean, again, it's not Catholic Charities, so
Mm.
it's using the patrimony of the faithful. So it's been entrusted with these assets, financial and otherwise, to conduct the activities of the church, which should be for the salvation of souls. So if you've got somebody working for you that either can't do the job or won't do the job, then I think the most just and charitable thing would be to help them figure out
Mm.
where they could find a job.
Where they
I'm
can
not.
thrive.
Yep. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm not convinced. I wouldn't agree with Chris that they can't work because they can't work anywhere else. I think they could be coached. I think this would be a
Mm.
phenomenal thing that the church could model to the world of how to, how do we hire for excellence, and B, when we've made a mistake, is there something that we can do to help this person
Mhm.
land on their feet?
Mhm.
So I I think what the problem is it's the bureaucracy that we implement. I mean, if we're talking about practices like transparency and accountability, I say amen. We need more of that, right? Also, like figuring out what is somebody's role. I mean, I think our bishops need to have the skills to. I mean, I did the church management work before. They need to have the skills to oversee a team of experts. I don't think they need to be the financial expert. They don't need to be the CFO, but they sure need to know enough to oversee a CFO, to know how to hire a good CFO. When I worked with Cardinal Pell and then Archbishop Muheria on this, he's from Nigeria. They said that if they had the right people on their finance councils, meaning people who were competent, people who would ask tough questions, they never had to overrule a decision made by the Diocesan Finance Council. So, to my mind, and this is where the expertise of the laity should show up and
Mm.
shine through. And we all know that, I mean, we all know that we're not going to get rich working for the church. We can make all sorts of offline jokes about that. But you can get paid, the church can afford to pay people decently. And really, and again, what is the expertise of the laity? If so many of these things, I find that we're looking for a bishop to say something. The bishop doesn't have to say that. There are plenty of lay experts. And at the end of the day, a lot of these things do fall under the realm of prudential reasoning. It's not like, are you in favor of life, or are you in favor of abortion? I mean, there's a heck of a lot of gray area where lay expertise could really be utilized. So the problem to my mind is not the corporatization, it's the bureaucracy. And there are corporations that do run efficiently and effectively. And across the board, I mean, in terms of how they treat their people, what they make, and generating a profit.
Look at Costco. I think Costco is a great example of a publicly traded company that treats employees well. They pay for significant medical benefits. They do maternity leave and all these other things, pay living wages. I mean, I think that's a great example of what you're talking about, Pia. What I would say as a CEO, and I think, Chris, you're a CEO too. So what I would say is if I have an employee who is dramatically underperforming, that's my fault. I hired them. I have failed to train them properly. I failed to put them into the right position. And so one of the philosophies, I guess, or rules that we had at my secular companies, Golden State, was we would hire somebody and maybe they weren't right for that job. And we would own that. And then we would find them the role in the organization that does work for them. You don't have to fire them. It's just, if you hire somebody to be the person answering the phones, but it turns out they're actually really terrible interpersonally, but really good at math. I mean, you move them over to accounting or something like that. I've done this before,
100%.
literally.
I agree with that entirely. One of the things I find the most joy in the work that I get to do on a daily basis now is we get to go after really talented people. And sometimes it's like, let's get them in the boat because we just know that that's going to be a really great addition to our team. And the future of our institute is going to just be dramatically impacted by their presence. And then, you know what? It might be a little bit awkward the first 3 months. We're going to find their place on the boat, right? But we just did a hire, and I say, hey, look, here's the base gig, but then like on top of that, we've got a whole smorgasbord of things you could be doing. Let's pick 2 and work on those next year. I'm gonna let you pick those, right? And just make of it what you will, and maybe that spaghetti falls on the floor, but
what's the name of your institute again, Chris?
Yeah, we're the Veterum Sapientia Institute. That's a good ecclesiastical Latin pronunciation.
VSI.
Yeah, VSI. That's right. We're working on that.
I heard that in Latin we do it wrong, and that it's the V's are pronounced with a W, like a W.
Oh yeah. Winnie Witty Wiki, right?
That's classical pronunciation, not church pronunciation.
It's the restorationists that sort of start with the principle that the church didn't actually carry on the use of Latin for 2 millennia.
I don't know about all that. I can't do either versions of Latin, so I think it's fine. Well, so I first of all, I have one last question, actually, or one last subject I'd like to bring up before we wrap up here. Pia, you work at IWP Capital. And so you have on the ground work that you're doing in terms of research for publicly traded companies, and you as their head theologian at that particular organization, which Arimathea works very closely with, and very proud to be associated with you guys. For the folks that are listening here, investing can be very daunting. Finance can be very daunting. And it can be daunting, I believe, from multiple lenses, but the 2 that I want to highlight, the complexity of finance, the complexity of theology. These are like the 2 most complex subjects in the world. We mix them together and we say, we're going to do finance within this theological construct. How do people start thinking this way? Like what would you give them in terms of advice to say, all right, I need to think about finance as a Catholic woman or man? What advice would you give them as the head theologian at IWP Capital?
I mean, the first thing I would say is working with a personal budget. Do you even have or know what a personal budget is? Most people think they know what it is, but once they haven't actually done one. So I would say start there and start thinking about what are your needs. And at that point, I would say go see somebody at Arimathea that can help you work through
Thank you.
no, they can help you work through what are your life needs, life goals, and so forth. In terms of actually investing, I mean, find the tools. That's the point. That's my point, is find the tools. And so many of us are overwhelmed because we don't know where to look. And again, there is fake news on every side of the aisle. So I see things that, Starbucks says this crazy thing, and then I put a researcher on it and we can't find anything, right? And so, but all of our investment ideas, we think, oh, that's bad and that's bad and that's bad. Well, that's what IWP does. We do the research, we do that deep dive research in terms of figuring out, and this is with regards to what the company makes or the service that they provide. Now, if we're talking about a behavior, that's where we would use engagement, or that's where we leverage our proxy voting and corporate engagement. But this is where we want to get into questions of, employee compensation. We vote when we vote proxies on CEO compensation. There's a ratio in there that corresponds to the median employee compensation in the company. Sadly, it's grown astronomically over the years. That's, again, a separate conversation. But we want to start digging down into not just the products or services. Do they make a good product? If they're pharma, do they use human embryonic stem cells and so forth? So we've got all that research. What I want to start digging down is, can we challenge these companies? Maybe some of them are already doing an amazing job of making sure that their lowest paid are not the working poor. I don't know. That's what I want to find out. We're doing a project right now where we're researching which companies support abortion travel, right? And what I'm finding out is it's not a pot of money that's just sitting there, because that would violate HIPAA law. What I'm finding is that most of them enunciated an already existing benefit of healthcare, which now gets very complicated, all right? Because at least 8 states mandate abortion coverage. The 8 states mandate abortion coverage. Employers have to give the same benefits to all employees. So now that's a battle that our policy friends and our legislative friends are going to have to take on. I can't do that one, right? But what I can do is I can come back to the company and say, hey, are you making people aware of the maternity and paternity benefits that they have? By the way, here's a third-party vendor that can help your employees access benefits that you already pay for. We're not asking you to pay for more, right? I can come back to the company and say, just wondering, your insurance covers fertility-based care. Do your employees know that? And tell the stories so that at least 1 or 2 people sitting in that investor relations committee meeting, it's going to stick with them. That's the type of work that we can do. So I would say, start with, do you know how to do a budget? Like, can you figure out how much money you have, what you owe, what you need? Once you can do that, and there are plenty of online tools, then start doing some research. Meet with somebody from Arimathea or another advisory group that you trust, right? And if you don't, and also talk to lots of them. I mean, I've talked to advisors in the past. It's like, I don't care how Catholic you are. You have no idea what you're talking about. I can feel it in my gut. I know that you don't know anything. The fact that you can't give me a straightforward answer tells me everything that I need to know. I'll see you at the next pro-life dinner, but you're not touching my money. Okay.
Yes. Well, I mean, we have to be.
But then let a company like ours do our work in terms of the research. Don't get your news from just be careful. Whatever you take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And then we can do that work in terms of screening, working with an advisor, doing the corporate engagement, because we talk about people having to steward the ownership of their shares. And so it's not enough to just go and buy some safe fund, and I'm not going to name any. You actually have to make sure that the proxies are being voted in line with your values, and ask, is there corporate engagement going on? Most of the time, I guarantee you, there is no corporate engagement.
Right. And the USCCB has said, if we are going to own these companies that are violating Catholic social teaching, we must be advocating for them to repent and change, which is what evangelization is all about. So I wanted to end on that note. So Pia, thank you very much for taking what I think can feel very high level in terms of theology and finance and making it practical and real. I appreciate that. And Dr. Blum, thank you very much for your insightful article. I thought that was really awesome. We're going to go ahead and link it here on the podcast so people can read it on their own. And Chris, thank you for being provocative as always. I really appreciate that. You not hit that out of the park. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for tuning in to Theology of Money. I'm Daniel Catone of Arimathea, and we look forward to seeing you at our next show. Thank you.